try it again, because y'all who know, you know. Good morning. Love it. So I'm not a morning person, so driving up to Santa Fe at 6:30 this morning to get here and get grounded into and ready for this presentation is, I want to celebrate that I made it here on time, but I live. So as Hillary said, my name is Shani Harvie. I've been with the Economic Development Department since 2019, and it was really my own kind of case of crossroads to get here. So before I get into my spiel about the division, I want to talk to you all a little bit about myself and how I got into this position. And as Hillary mentioned, I am a graduate of the New Mexico School for the Arts. I was a music student, and I was part of the first graduating class to go through all 4 years at the school when it first opened in 2010. And my fellow classmates, we kind of like to joke that we were the guinea pigs of the school when it was getting started, because we didn't know if it was going to last, we didn't know how things were going to turn out, and a lot of us didn't know what was going to come of going to a school that was rigorous in arts and academics. But before I got into NMSA, I attended the Public Academy for the Performing Arts in Albuquerque. So I grew up in Albuquerque, but I spent my formative years in Santa Fe. And at PAPA, Public Academy for the Performing Arts, I took dance, I took film, I was in band starting in the 6th grade, and I was kind of everywhere in the performing arts and fine arts space. So my first crossroads was in applying for NMSA. I had to pick one art form and one discipline that I wanted to commit to. And that ended up being music, and I played alto saxophone, and I went through 4 years of theory and juries and learning what it meant to be a professional performing musician. And after 4 years of that, I was like, there's no way that I'm gonna do this for another 4 years in college, because I was tired and I wasn't ready for kind of the cutthroat industry that comes along with classical music performance. And I also wasn't very excited about turning around to be a band teacher, be an instructor, or kind of have to fight for my way into a first chair position. So that was my first crossroads was choosing music as a discipline to kind of have to commit to. And then when it came time to go into university and into college, I had gotten into a ton of schools across the US, but the caveat was I had to study music, and I wasn't really excited to do that anymore. And for anyone who might have known me for who I was then, I was also a troublemaker in school. So I was not ready to kind of give up and commit. So I ended up at UNM, and after being in art school for so long, I actually ran from the identity of being a creative and being an artist. I wanted people to take me seriously. I was like, I'm gonna get my business degree, I'm gonna study economics, and I'm gonna try to, make a change. And I somehow landed in economic development after working the legislative session, which I also didn't want to do. It was another crossroads. And I had one of my mom's friends who was an attorney suggest, it's only a 60-day session. It could lead you to new connections. You might as well go ahead and do it. And it was like, what do? I have to make the choice. How do I want to proceed? And I ended up at session, and then that led me to economic development. And I've been with EDD for going on 6 years this next May, and it's been this really interesting kind of full circle and crossroads to come back into working for and on behalf of the creative economy for New Mexico. So as Hillary mentioned, I started the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office, our Jedi office, because Jedi sounds cool, because you get to talk about Star Wars, and I get to talk about bringing balance to the Force and bringing resources and services to people who don't often get them when we're talking about business development and entrepreneurship. And Joanna was actually super instrumental in that process and helped me kind of understand a lot of different frameworks around community navigating and who the partners were and how to approach these things. So when we were Jedi partners back in the day at EDD, I got to learn a lot from her as well under her expertise and leadership. And then the Creative Industries Division came along through legislation. And I didn't know, whoops, wrong way, as Tracy warned me. It came about, and it was really interesting because I had this background in arts and creativity work, but I had tried to distance myself from it. But now I also had this business and economic background that I could cross over. And so many of my friends and family members and the communities that I were connected to were artists and creatives, and over again, watching folks not get connected to funding or not know how to take the next steps, but have these really brilliant ideas, but maybe not the insight on how to manifest them into the world that we have within the certain structures and boundaries that we have within. You gotta register your business and gotta navigate Secretary of State and local planning and zoning offices and all these things that make creative brains kind of turn off and wanna exit the room. It was an opportunity that I would get to bring both sides of who I was to the table to be able to advocate and find a pathway forward. So it was definitely Crossroads that led me back to being in creative industries, and I didn't know at the time I would be going out for the director position. I was just kind of a volunteer because I wanted to help. I was like, I know people who are gonna be impacted by this, so I wanna support with pushing the funding out. So you saw the picture of Rashawn earlier, and before the Creative Industries Division actually got started, it was you all who brought it into being. It took creative advocacy and creative voices before any of this could happen, and we get to talk about funding and grant projects and all this stuff. It was actually creative communities and advocacy organizations like New Mexico Creative and folks like Irene Oliver Lewis, and of course like our bill sponsors, who brought this into being and actually gave it the opportunity. And that was another crossroads, even for New Mexico, because looking at the creative economy as an economic driver and pulling it into the business development landscape is not something that's traditionally done when we think about large-scale economic and business development. We're usually looking at manufacturing companies and landing, large numbers of jobs. And my argument is that it's the creative and innovative culture in communities that exist already that bring those larger companies into the places that we want to see them. So without taking care of our creatives and without nurturing the business development aspect of where they're at, we're actually not going to see the economic growth that we talk about all the time. It's kind of like it works in tandem to bring everything together. So in 2023, we got established by the New Mexico legislature, and it was with the support of you all and your creative voices from across the state, talking about the need for it, not letting up, and continuing to advocate for that brought it to the attention of bill sponsors, and then it was signed into law in April of 2023. I probably won't go through this whole timeline, so hopefully while I've been rambling, you had a chance to read through the bullet points. But in 2024, we released a study that was done in conjunction with Poe Cultural Center, Vital Spaces, and Creative Startups, who led the way. And they traveled to all 33 counties of the state, probably met with over 150 individuals, and spent a lot of time on the road to kind of bring feedback and insights and needs together in a study that would help the division get off the ground and provide grant programs, examples for grant programs, and a lot of other things that kind of got us to where we are. And then in August of 2024, we appointed our first director. That's me. I somehow was in the right place at the right time, given the crossroads that I had taken. And I was really nervous about it. And I think what was beautiful about the definition of crossroads for this morning was doing the part that feels right. And sometimes things will feel right, but there's also still a little bit of fear and nervousness around it. And I've been doing a lot of work on my own to reframe that as excitement, because I didn't know where this would lead, but I was getting a little teary-eyed sitting back here thinking about Crossroads and just all the opportunities that I've had to push myself forward or make a different choice and somehow end up to be here with you all today, which is just a really beautiful opportunity. And then in November, I hired a coordinator. So now my whole division is 2 people, and we are out here trying to support the state. So what's really beautiful about having the Creative Industries Division is that we get to live amongst a lot of different programs that are doing amazing work across the state, including the Outdoor Recreation Division, Film Office, New Mexico Partnership, New Mexico Main Street. So economic development is a relatively small agency, but we touch a ton of different industry areas. And now that creative industries has been introduced as part of economic development, it means that we get to form creative industries as a potential economic driver for the state. So it means that economic developers, finance professionals, as well as government officials are going to be able to look at the creative economy and actually focus resources, time, and intention into it from a place of this can be an economic driver for the state. And saying that to Santa Fe is kind of redundant because, creative economy drives the cultural identity of Santa Fe already, but that's not the same for some of our smaller rural communities. And now that we have a division that's dedicated to this within economic development, it means that we get to stretch across state government and down with local government to make sure that this is on folks' radar and on their process so that we can continue to grow our creative economy. And especially in a time, this is the point I want to make, see, I got to look at the notes. Especially in a time when our global environment is very uncertain, the creative economy is the part that presents us with an opportunity to find unique and creative solutions. It's really easy to focus on what's going wrong in the world, but for me and where I come from and in my spirit, the creative economy is going to give us the opportunity to find the solutions that will bring us forward. Obviously, traditional business development and infrastructure isn't continuing to work as seamlessly as we want it to, and it doesn't reach everybody that we need it to if we want the US economy to continue growing. And the creative economy presents a really unique opportunity to actually push that growth into these other areas and put that power back in creative's hands. My thought is that where we are at today wouldn't be here without creativity, and it's creativity that kind of is the spark of human nature and human creation and really puts us in a space where we can do this. We wouldn't have wonderful art and architecture and places to gather if it wasn't for the creativity and human spirit, and it's that creativity that promotes our resilience and developments as we continue to navigate unknown terrain because the world keeps changing. So this is a definition of the creative economy that's adapted from Americans for the Arts, and it's made up of artists, creative businesses, nonprofits, and educators that use creativity to generate jobs, income, and community value. I'm not going to read through the whole thing because you will have it up there, so hopefully the words are big enough. But really, I see the state's ability to focus on creative economic development as an opportunity to find unique solutions. We know that the state's budget is heavily dependent on oil and natural gas, and as well as natural resource extraction. And as we watch those things kind of dwindle down by 2030, and there's kind of these goals and initiatives to wind that kind of thing down, creative economy presents an opportunity for us to fill some of those gaps. I definitely don't think that we can make up for the billions or trillions of dollars that it brings into the state of New Mexico, but it's one piece of how we can kind of fit the gap, as well as film and TV activities, creative economy, outdoor recreation, right? We have to be creative in how we're gonna continue to move our entire state forward, and this is an opportunity for us to do that. So what are the creative industries? This is the fun one, because creativity doesn't actually fit in boxes, but because I work in government, I have to somehow label and put things into boxes, which didn't really work well when we just closed our last grant application, because I have folks who, when we're creative businesses, we don't stick in one area. There's folks who are doing ceramics, but they're also doing visual arts, and they might have a performing arts aspect in there, or they're doing entertainment and media, but they're also crossing it with graphics and industrial design and technology. So these are our 6 creative clusters is what I'm calling them for the division, but it overlaps about 21 different industry areas throughout creative industries. And there is a education component on this where when people think creative economy, they think only about performing artists, and that's not how the legislation was drawn out for the state. So we do have everything from entertainment and information broadcasting. This includes museum and gallery professions and landscape architecture and applied arts and design, promotion and marketing, which is a huge part of being creative, and all of these are also instrumental in traditional business, right? I think regular business is gonna have a hard time continuing on growing and competing in a market where it doesn't prioritize its creatives and the creativity that it needs to adapt, especially when it comes to whether it's global pandemic or just keeping up with changing times. Technology, computer system design, software coding, and digital media. Think of extended reality, virtual reality, and kind of where we're going with AI. There's a lot of considerations that are going to be needed for creatives as we move into a more digital era, and The way I look at it is we don't want to be left behind by like the dot-com bubble. You don't want to be in 2025 without an email address. You're not going to not want to know the basics of what AI and language learning models are capable of. And that's not saying that you have to use them. It's to make sure that you know what is possible with the technology so that you're not caught off guard or blindsided when these developments start rolling out and meeting with current environment. And last but not least, because this is a huge number of folks who are in New Mexico, but are crafts and artisans professions. So that's everything from culinary and glass, woodworking, ceramics, and so on. So when you think creative economy, it's massive. And every time I look at it, it gets bigger and bigger. And then they also don't stay in these boxes. Things cross over. And you also have people who work in these industry areas that might work in a traditional business environment. So it's just like the inherent nature of the creative economy is that it's a little bit difficult to measure. But that's also the beauty of it, because you can't actually define it. Well, but we did today. So our mission for the division itself is to advance the state's creative industries by supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses who are engaged in the creative economy. And we do that through economic development efforts, including education, workforce development, public infrastructure, grant making, and resource sharing. And our vision is to establish the creative industries in New Mexico as a significant driver of economic opportunity for New Mexicans and for our state economy. There's so many people, even before we were granted statehood, who were engaged in creative economy activities in New Mexico because it's innate to who we are and it's innate to our identity. So it's actually a long time coming and a perfect crossroads point for New Mexico to start taking a look at this as an economic driver, especially when there's so much uncertainty going on in the greater world. This is kind of a look at who we serve, and I'm excited to be serving these populations because it's kind of a cross of, as I said, it's the people who I know, and it's making sure that we're providing the same opportunities that traditional large-scale business they know on a day-to-day basis, but artists and creatives don't necessarily walk into an economic development office on a day-to-day basis and say, let me sit with you and go through my business plan, and I've got these ideas. We start other places. So we work with entrepreneurs and small businesses who are engaged in the creative industries, and we also work with organizations and companies that support creative industry companies and workers. You could think of that like Santa Fe Economic Development, because they're doing programming that supports creative economy. There's also organizations like Vital Spaces that are doing that work, creative startups, Arts Hub, and several others. So kind of like nonprofits and folks who are working in the space to do workforce support. And then our third main customer or person that we serve is local governments who are looking at establishing public infrastructure for the creative industries. So example for this, we're standing in this building right now. It is a DCA RAN building, Department of Cultural Affairs. So that is public infrastructure that's available for the creative industries. When we think about the Midtown campus in Santa Fe, where the University for Art and Design used to be, those are potential public infrastructure projects that we may partner with City of Santa Fe, for example, in the future to help flow funds that way to get the campus back up to the place where we can get other creative economy businesses moving into it. So we're doing that kind of work in tandem with several different small cities and governments and towns across the state. And then we also support broad creative industry stakeholders. So these are your artists and creatives who maybe haven't started a business yet but are interested in getting connected. These are the kinds of folks where we're mostly going to have online resources because I'm only a team of 2, and if I sit with every creative to go through their business plan, I will never get out of here, which is fun, and it's a great part of the job, but it keeps me from being able to work on some of these larger projects. So a lot of this is how we work in tandem with like New Mexico Arts to make referrals, partnerships with small business development centers and local contractors who are more on a day-to-day, one-to-one can work with business owners to kind of build out what they're trying to build, and helping creatives to see themselves as economic drivers, because our ability to perform and entertain and create things with our hands or even digitally is what brings people kind of into community, and it's what gauges interest. It's why tourism and cultural tourism is so big in Santa Fe. That's what's bringing people here. So that's creativity is the spark that gets everyone else excited. And you know how folks that aren't creative are, they'll tell you like, I used to play an instrument and I used to paint and I'm really wanting to get back to it. Everybody has creativity inside of them and you should absolutely get back to it, don't wait. So part of the work of this division, in my mind, is breaking down a lot of the silos that we work in with state government. When I say creative economy and creative economic development, that doesn't mean it's gonna only be within the creative industries division. That would be basically impossible, and then we don't even have the resources to do it. So it takes working in tandem with folks like New Mexico Arts and Cultural Affairs to make sure that we are supporting and cross-supporting programs, working with tourism to help with their getting information out about their grants. They do a lot of event sustainability grants, which are really great for creative communities and creative economy. And then there's also the piece around higher education and public education, right? If we're not teaching our students and our youth and our children the power of creativity or giving them an option to engage in a fine arts class, we're preventing them from being able to access a piece of their identity that might be true to who they are. I was blessed enough to have the opportunity to spend a lot of time in art school and make my way back to supporting creatives. But we're working in tandem with a lot of these different agencies, not just because they're listed on the legislation as like a mandatory partner, but because it's gonna take all of us to move the creative economy forward. And that means multiple government agencies and programs, and it also means community organizations like CreativeMornings, and then individuals like you all who have a voice and advocacy to actually get things done. I like to tell folks, I can't really create programming out of thin air. I have to have one of you all come to my office with a complaint or an idea in order to prompt that thing to happen. Government's isn't the best on taking action without having a reason to, so that's the piece why advocacy and using your voice is still so important. So town hall meetings, city hall meetings, open government meetings, we're hosting open office hours, I'll talk about that later, but making sure that you're providing that feedback is the only way that a lot of us in state government are able to take action. So, quick facts on the creative economy. In New Mexico, we're generating over $6 billion in annual economic activity in our state alone, contributing to $1.6 billion in taxable wages, and about 12% of all GRT businesses that are registered for the state of New Mexico right now are creative industries and creative economy in nature. And with 118% projected growth by 2030, this means that we are at a crossroads, I did it again, to really lean into what this means for our creatives and for our businesses and entrepreneurs that are here in the state. Like I said earlier, this is a huge opportunity for our rural communities. There's places like Silver City and Raton, and I am blanking on the other city that I'm thinking of, but they're heavily reliant on mining industry or extractive industry like oil and gas. But they also have a lot of creatives that are already in those spaces, and if we can focus on helping them lean into their own creative and cultural identity, it means when they lose those industries that they don't have to lose the identity that they have as a community. And usually what I say when I'm working in community is that we're not trying to come in and tell you what you need to be doing with your creative economy. We want to know what's already here, and then we want to be able to provide resources to stand that up more. Santa Fe is basically a blueprint for this because there is amazing things happening everywhere in a cross between different creative economy collaborations, and even with the sponsorships that you all showed earlier, right? You have CreativeMornings, you have a culinary arts business, then you have local government, and you have, I missed the one on the far left, but multiple industries coming together to create something else, right? And these are the kind of collaborations and programs and projects that are actually going to create change within our communities, because we can't keep doing it the same way because that's not been working. So when we're looking at growth for New Mexico and for our rural communities, and even still Santa Fe, this projected growth is huge, and it means that it's ripe with opportunity for creative economy right now. We know that folks are spending more money on experiences because they want to make memories. Creative economy is perfect for that because it combines arts and experience economy and a lot more into it. So, for the study that was done, checking my time. For the study that was done by creative startups and then Vital Spaces and Poe Cultural Center. These are kind of the present needs that were teased out of the entire creative economy, not very specific to each industry area. So the need for real estate and live work spaces for creatives. We know that rent, particularly in this part of town for Santa Fe, continues to go up. So if we can work creatively in ways with local government and also other organizations to come up with creative ways to offer real estate options and month-to-month options maybe for vacant spaces, those are some of the projects that we're looking at doing in several of our communities. And then we're also creating grant programs and supporting existing grant programs to help with marketing and wayfinding. There is some great opportunities both through New Mexico Arts and Tourism that are addressing some of that. And then of course, increased access to the language of funding and grants. I've read through 70 grant applications in the last 2 weeks, and I can tell you that how we talk about our creativity and the impact that it makes is crucial. So we're working on trying to provide resources and insights on how we can talk about creative economy in practice and creative projects in practice that can make funders and elected officials and bankers listen a little bit more. It's just a different vocabulary, and we do have a section in the study that's like a 3 to 6 page cutout written and penned by Rashawn on how to do that kind of work. So we're working on kind of doing workshops and classes and then providing resources around how to talk about those projects. And then of course, in our digital environment, intellectual property is huge, so educating creatives on how to maintain those protections, especially when you're venturing off into Meta, and Instagram and TikTok and what that means. And then we saw all the Studio Ghibli memes for those of us who were scrolling and what that meant for ChatGPT and IP considerations. So these are a lot of the things that are on our mind as we're trying to get the division off the ground. And then of course, relationships with retail and wholesale middlemen, because small individual creative businesses and crafters need those relationships to maintain their businesses. And we have a couple of creative ways that we're thinking about that for next year. Our future opportunities for the creative economy, cultural heritage innovation. So I think Santa Fe does this wonderfully. Here we are in this amazing historic theater that has a lot of the pieces that are beautiful for architecture and religious culture and helping us remember who we are. But we're also allowing this space to be used to do talks and presentations, and we're merging the development of the economy with what we already have here. So that's an example of that. And it's also just maintaining our cultural heritage and identity when we're moving into doing innovative projects. So how can we use digital technology and media to maintain our cultural identity and heritage while not losing who we are in the process, but still using the tools that we have coming forward? Experience economy is also huge. We see a lot of people merging different experiences with the things that they're offering. And then regenerative capital, environmental resilience, and data empowerment is also some of the stuff we're working on, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that we're doing to address that. But environmental resilience for one, because Broken Arrow Glass Recycling is here, I have to mention this. I participated in their sustainability weekend, but they're a great example of how the creative economy can be used to solve problems, right? Because they're doing glass recycling, but there's actually an opportunity for them to be maybe working with construction companies and other folks who can kind of use the creativity that they're bringing to the table to recycle old glass to then solve environmental challenges that might be going on in terms of building materials or supply chain. So there's an opportunity here for creative economy businesses and minds to be really instrumental in finding the ways that we're going to move forward and solve the problems that we're addressing, especially when it comes to things like water and building supplies. Learning for enchantment. We're the land of enchantment, and everybody, we don't stop growing until we are done with this life. So the opportunity for learning continues to be there. So this is a huge opportunity for New Mexico because we have such a rich history and identity that we can share with folks, that leaning on this learning for enchantment and teaching new skills and learning new things, whether that is something like stained glass or keeping an old art form kind of continuing on, we can keep those things alive, and those things can also generate economic activity for our communities and for our economies. So it's actually a really exciting time. Let me see what else I have here, y'all. How are we doing that to date? We have a Creative Industries Resource Center that's up on our website. We're going to be expanding that into a knowledge center where folks can kind of go in and pick out data that we've collected from other companies, other programs that we've ran, and folks who are willing to share their data with us so that we can make it available for you all. So when you're turning around to defend your programs, projects, and business development, you'll have access to the same information that we have for when we come out and make presentations or we're forming programming. We're going to turn that data around and make it available to you all so that you can empower the work that you're doing. But on our Creative Industries Resource Center, if you're not registered and you get on there and you see businesses that aren't there, it's kind of like a white pages for creative businesses, and I say that with some, with a little bit of, I say that with a grain of salt because we're still figuring out how the best way to measure a lot of this is, but it has co-working spaces, creative businesses, educational organizations, galleries, libraries, maker spaces, studios, venue spaces, museums, higher ed and continuing education programs, and more, as well as individual creative businesses. So this is housed on our website, and you can navigate by creative industry cluster, you can navigate by county, by area, and we have probably about over 450 assets from across the state listed in these, listed on the map. So for Santa Fe, I have these are some examples that I pulled: Stark Raven Fabrication, I can't pronounce that one, and then Broken Arrow Glass because anyway, this is where that slide's from. But if you visit us on the Creative Industries Resource Center, we're basically trying to give a demonstration of what's available to the wider community. So if you're looking for a space to host an event, or if you're looking to get information out on your business, this is a great place to list that. And we're constantly working on growing that and expanding it to include an events calendar and the Knowledge Resource Center, like I mentioned. Another way that we're doing this is through our Creative Industries season, which our theme this year is collaboration and creativity. We chose that pretty specifically because as we've been out in community, creatives tend to have amazing ideas, but we like to work, some of us like to work alone because we're worried about what's going to happen if we share that idea outside of our own safe space. And our interpretation is there's so many people who are trying to work towards the same outcome and the same objective that by working together and collaborating, we have an opportunity to actually do more. So our theme this year is based on that. So we've been doing statewide events. We're going to be sponsoring Native Fashion Week and the Currents Festival here in Santa Fe. So come check out those events, but they're also great demonstrations of the creative economy in action. And then we're also doing live discussions every Friday at 10 and 1 with local creatives to talk about their experience in collaboration and what that's looked like. And then we're also going to be doing networking events and open office hours. So we'll be at our Santa Fe offices April 30th, which is in the Joseph Montoya building right there off St. Francis across from Trader Joe's. And we're just going to be basically hanging out for 3 hours, 12 to 3. Come in, drop in. We're going to provide snacks. You can kind of connect with other creatives, connect with us, tell us what your thoughts are, what your concerns are, and we can talk to you more about our programming and what the division is working on. And this is a continuation of Creative Industries Week that the contractor led last year, and we're hoping to potentially turn this into kind of a larger statewide summit next year with more time. So in order for us to do this job well and to make sure that we have everyone's voices included, we are engaged on social media, and we also have a newsletter. So you'll have those QR codes there to sign up with us, but we'll be doing more, and we need your feedback and your engagement in order to make the difference that we need to make in New Mexico. So if you can stay connected with us, we'd love that. I've also learned that creatives don't really like to read emails, so I definitely have had to focus on social media and doing kind of like engaging content that way. And I've also had to start texting people back on my phone, and I'm so used to doing emails only that it's been a shift for me. So I'm telling everyone that my 9 to 5 is turning into a 9 to 5 on the creative timeline. So it means I'm working from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. when all the other creatives are active in their business. This is me. This is Arlen, our coordinator. He's helping us lead a workshop over at the New Mexico School for the Arts today, so he's not here. But this is our team of 2, but we can't do it without you all, so we would love to stay connected with you, and thank you for giving me the time today to talk to you all about the creative economy for New Mexico.